in the frozen heart of Russia, where golden domes pierce through a sky of drifting snow and candlelight flickers beneath ancient icons, lies a mystery that has endured for more than 1,000 years. The Russian Orthodox Church, spiritual guardian of a vast empire, voice of faith in times of chaos, and silent keeper of untold wealth, has long stood at the crossroads of divinity and power. To outsiders, its cathedrals are monuments of devotion, their walls echoing with sacred chants that seem to bridge heaven and earth. But to those who look closer, beyond the incense and gilded frescoes, another story unfolds. A story of treasure, influence, and secrecy so immense that even empires have risen and fallen in its shadow. The origins of Russia's sacred treasure are older than the empire itself. In the 10th century, when Prince Vladimir of Kiev embraced Christianity, the faith that would shape a nation was born not in poverty, but in splendor. Gold, icons, and jeweled relics poured in from Byzantium, and with them came a belief that holiness could be adorned, that faith could shine like sunlight upon a chalice of gold. Over the centuries, monasteries became fortresses of wealth, lavish estates that owned fields, forests, and entire villages. Peasants worked the lands of the church as they did for the czars, and in return, the church promised salvation. By the dawn of the 18th century, it was said that 1 in every 10 acres of Russian soil belonged to God, or at least to those who spoke in his name. As Peter the Great modernized his empire, he saw the church's riches as both a blessing and a threat. In an empire hungry for progress, divine wealth became imperial capital. Gold from monasteries helped forge cannons, build ships, and expand cities. But even as the state drew the church closer, it could never fully penetrate its sacred vaults. Behind monastery walls, treasures continued to grow. Icons studded with emeralds, ancient manuscripts written in silver ink, and crosses rumored to contain fragments of the true cross itself. Each relic held not just religious value, but immense political weight. To control such objects was to control the soul of the Russian people, and so began a delicate dance between throne and altar, each depending on the other, each wary of the other's power. When the Bolsheviks seized power in 1917, they declared war on the old order, and with it on the church. They stormed monasteries, confiscated gold, melted chalices into bars, and stripped icons of their jewels. Officially, it was done in the name of equality. Unofficially, it was the greatest transfer of sacred wealth in Russian history. Yet even then, not everything was lost. Hidden beneath altars, buried beneath the earth, or smuggled abroad, many treasures escaped destruction. Some were secretly guarded by believers who risked their lives to preserve what they saw as holy heritage. Others were hidden by the church itself, in catacombs known only to a handful of priests. When Soviet archives opened decades later, whispers began to surface. Rumors of sealed chambers beneath Moscow's oldest cathedrals, of tunnels connecting monasteries to forgotten vaults. Historians dismissed them as myths, but locals told a different story, that in times of persecution, faith itself went underground, taking its fortune with it. As the Soviet Union collapsed, the church returned, not humbled, but reborn. In a nation hungry for identity, it rose once more as moral compass and symbol of unity. Cathedrals that had been turned into museums or warehouses were restored with miraculous speed. Gold leaf returned to domes, icons were regilded, and bells that had been silent for 70 years rang again. The question that few dared to ask was simple: how was it all funded? In a country still recovering from economic collapse, where salaries were scarce and factories stood silent, the church suddenly wielded enormous financial power. Investigators who tried to trace the money found a maze of foundations, donations, and private trusts, many connected to businessmen who owed their fortunes to state contracts or energy exports. Some whispered that the new oligarchs sought not salvation but protection, spiritual cover for their worldly gains. The church, in turn, gained allies with deep pockets and political reach. In the modern era, the Russian Orthodox Church is one of the most influential institutions in the country. Its patriarch is not merely a religious figure, but a statesman, his words echoing through the halls of government. Critics argue that faith and politics have become intertwined, that blessings are exchanged for influence, that incense hides the scent of power. Yet within this criticism lies fascination. For the church's wealth is not only financial, it is cultural, historical, and symbolic. Its treasures include paintings by Andrei Rublev, relics of saints, manuscripts older than the Mongol invasion. Some of these are displayed for pilgrims. Others remain unseen, locked away in vaults said to rival the treasures of any museum on Earth. There are whispered estimates, hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of dollars in sacred art, gold, and land. But exact numbers are elusive, because the church, unlike a corporation or state institution, is not required to reveal them. Its ledgers are written not in accounting sheets, but in tradition, authority, and divine trust.
Outside Russia, the legend of the Orthodox gold continues to inspire curiosity. In European archives, documents hint at shipments of icons and relics that vanished during wars or revolutions. Some were sold quietly through Swiss intermediaries, reappearing decades later in private collections. Others may still lie hidden in monasteries that survived untouched by time, where monks preserve not only the prayers of their ancestors, but their treasure as well. In the digital age, when transparency is demanded of governments and charities alike, the church's secrecy feels anachronistic. And yet, that very secrecy gives it power. Faith, after all, thrives on mystery. And what could be more mysterious than the notion that somewhere, beneath the cathedrals of Russia, sleeps a fortune consecrated to God, but guarded by men? The idea of sacred treasure has always fascinated humanity. Gold is eternal. It does not rust, it does not fade. In religion, gold becomes more than wealth. It becomes a symbol of divine light, purity, and immortality. The Orthodox Church, with its lavish icons and golden domes, does not hide this symbolism. To believers, the glittering interiors of its cathedrals are glimpses of heaven. To skeptics, they're reminders of inequality, the contrast between divine beauty and human poverty. This tension defines much of Russian history, a nation torn between spiritual idealism and material ambition. Every empire builds its temples, but in Russia, the temple itself became an empire. Yet, to reduce the church's wealth to greed would be to misunderstand its nature. Much of what it owns was donated over centuries by czars seeking forgiveness, merchants seeking luck, widows offering their last ruble in faith. The treasure of the church is, in part, the treasure of a people, a mirror of their hopes, fears, and sacrifices. When one stands beneath the soaring dome of the Cathedral of Christ the Savior in Moscow, rebuilt after the Soviet era, the weight of history is palpable. The marble, the gold, the paintings all tell the story of a faith that refused to die. But they also raise a question. Can faith remain pure when surrounded by so much splendor? For some, the answer lies in the church's role as a moral anchor in turbulent times. In a world driven by profit and technology, the Orthodox faith offers continuity, a link to tradition and meaning. But for others, that same continuity feels like control, a system where spiritual authority shields earthly ambition.
Reports have surfaced over the years of clergy driving luxury cars, of lavish residences built for senior figures, of tax exemptions that critics say allow billions to circulate unchecked. Yet such accusations rarely lead to open confrontation. In Russia, the church remains one of the most trusted institutions, its influence woven deeply into national identity. For every critic who sees corruption, there are millions who see sanctity. And so the mystery endures. How much wealth does the church truly possess? Where did it all come from? And what purpose does it serve today? These are questions that no official audit can fully answer, because the treasure is not merely gold, it is faith, legacy, and narrative. It exists in the relics that pilgrims kiss, the icons that survive revolutions, the cathedrals that rise from ashes. To understand it, one must see beyond balance sheets, beyond politics, and into the heart of a civilization that measures eternity not in numbers, but in symbols. Even so, behind the incense and the chants, the machinery of modern finance hums quietly. Charitable foundations linked to the church manage vast resources. Partnerships with state projects flow through unseen channels. In recent years, the church has invested in media, education, and even property development. Some see this as a natural evolution, a way to sustain spiritual life in the modern world. Others see it as a return to the feudal power it once held. The line between stewardship and possession blurs. Somewhere in that blur lies the essence of the mystery. Is this wealth truly sacred, or has it become a relic of power dressed in holy robes?